the pro referee strike and the replacement refs. So I'm gonna go out and you feel free to step in at any time and tell me if you are going to approach it differently. But I want to look at this in a way that's less about like what they're fighting for and what is going on like in that sort of aspect, because we don't have all that information, and I feel like that's kind of wrong, or I use the term injustice to talk about something that serious in nature without having all the facts. Like I don't want to speculate on anything and be like, oh, this is what it's going to be. um I feel wrong about talking like about stuff like that, um because I know I don't have all the facts, so I don't want to go and speculate on something like that. But instead, I do think that it's important to talk about kind of what it means for the league itself and what it means for the league going forward. But did you approach it in the same way? I guess I'll go there first.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. Probably not worth talking on something if there's not enough facts there to talk about. It's like going about the Bruce Arena situation where, it's something you want to talk about, I feel like, but considering there's just a lack of so much information, or not that that's necessarily the case here where it's like so much information that's lagging, but a lack of information kind of put you at a pause on talking about it because, what's the point in speculating if you're not gonna have enough information to kind of properly talk about it?
Right, and there are things that you can speculate on, and it's like, okay, that's fine. It's fair game. But I feel like something like this, where it actually like affects the day in and day out lives of individuals, I think that's probably a step too far, at least for us. We won't go into there, but um, you know, I made a list here of everything that I could find that I know, like that went out, and this is what was said, and I'll kind of run through it here so people who may not be familiar with the situation can understand what's going. So before I get into any of that, I do want to, and again, I don't think you'll disagree with me on this, but please step in and say that if you do. Um, Anybody in any job has the absolute right to be paid what they are owed, right? Especially in professional sports, but they have every right to fight what they believe is right for themselves, and as a union, fight for the betterment of the workers in general, right? So, reading some things about how they were getting paid and the way that they would be treated, nobody is arguing against their their decision here. So, I don't know if you disagree with that, but I would assume you don't.
No, I mean, in my opinion, I wholeheartedly agree with you. They should, stick together, fight together to get what they feel they deserve.
Yep, 100%. So definitely backing them and hoping that they can get a good deal worked out here. But let's kind of start with where we're at. So the first thing that was reported, that there was an offer made, and 95.8% of referees voted against this agreement. 2 days later, Don Garber comes out on MLS opening weekend and says that they came to this agreement and it was never actually taken back to the members properly. Um, so this vote, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're trying to fight for. Then the head of PRSA, Peter Manikowski, comes on and starts talking about how the offer was too low and explained why it was rejected. The no strike, no lockout deal. Garber did not know what they were asking for because he wasn't even there. That was the sticking point from the letter that I read from him. That Don Garber is out here complaining, we don't know what they're arguing for. Well, Don Garber wasn't even there. So then our good friend Mark Geiger, head of pro referees, comes back and makes his comments saying that there were inaccuracies in this letter written by Manikowski, saying that the agreement was made, including a 25% raise. There was some language used in the accusations that was incorrect, as well as some timing issues about when they said things were done. Then he turned it back on the PSRA, saying that they were authorizing a strike before the lockout was even suggested. It's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of he said, they said, not quite clear of what's going on. And then the final thing that I was able to dig up was that Chris Penso, an MLS referee, uh, partaking in this strike, has been accused of threatening MLS replacement officials, allegedly saying that they would be they would be reprimanded for engaging in this replacement work, and that he is kind of overseeing what they call third party work. So college games and calling up replacements. Maybe I didn't really get a good description of that. But basically, they were insinuating that the referees would not get other opportunities outside of it, basically blackballing them out of the referee community, which is illegal during a strike, from what I was reading. So right now, referees are striking all over the country, specifically outside of pro headquarters. They're upset that the games are still going on, and that's kind of where we're at. I know it was very vague. I don't have all the information. That's why I'm not trying to go in and nitpick all the stuff. I was just kind of giving you a gloss over where we've gotten to. There was an agreement. It came back. They said no. Everybody now is pointing out fingers of why it was said no. This is kind of where we're at, and they meet back up again on Wednesday, so 2 days after this is released. Connor, I want to ask you first. The way I'm approaching this is there are two things that this does first, and one of them is the quality of the league, right? So, what have you seen, at least in the last 14 games that we've seen here as we record before the Galaxy game? What have you seen with these referees that have now stepped in, and has the quality dropped at all?
I mean, admittedly, I haven't seen probably a ton of the games this weekend. I got to see a lot of the Atlanta game, a little bit of LAFC Seattle, and a little bit of Red Bull Nashville, a little bit of Cincy. So, you know, I don't want to speak on every single game that happened this weekend, but I would say from the games that I saw, I mean, there were small things that I complained about, and I think you and I were talking about it offline. And the little things like moving the ball back on a lot of free kicks just kind of felt like it slowed the momentum of the game a little bit, but ultimately not something where I'd be like, oh, the game's gone because these referees are just absolutely butchering it, making them retake all these free kicks. And overall, in terms of like the big calls, I mean, I think they made the right calls. I could say from the Atlanta Columbus game, I think the VAR PK stuff that went on, they ultimately, I think, landed on the right call, but it just took way too long to get to that point. And you had the broadcast saying that like, oh, it's confirmed, like not a penalty, and then all of a sudden now, like he's going over to the screen to look like that may not necessarily be on the referees. I don't know if that's a communication problem, but that looked a little bit sloppy, I would say. But ultimately, you got to the right decision. And I think that's the important thing at the end of the day. I mean, I think back to a lot of like, there are really famous missed ref calls from when the replacement refs came into the NFL. And I think that's what you would look to avoid here. Like, I don't think people who watch the NFL will ever forget I believe it was the Packers against somebody else. The touchdown call where the two referees had different signals and everybody was confused, and they ultimately made like I think the blatantly wrong call, and it looked really bad on the replacement refs. And I think that's probably what you're looking to avoid here. And I didn't get to see a lot of the seventh. I didn't get to see actually any of the 7:30 or 8:30 games yesterday. So I don't want to say for certain that nothing happened, but I also don't really remember seeing anything to that extent from the replacement refs. So I would say overall, I don't think the quality has like fallen off, or at least definitely not fallen off significantly.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, one of the big things that keeps getting cited in reports, whether it be in newspapers or articles or whatever, is the MLS is threatening the quality of their games because they're not bringing these referees back. And I agree with you. I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing is that the VAR calls are taking way longer than they should, um, and that's just to make sure they get it right. Whether and I don't think there's been a ton. The only really bad call that I've seen was on Twitter, and it was in the Dallas game. It was like the 88th minute, and there was I don't know if the defender was down, off the field of play or if he was behind, but he was off the screen in this clip, and they played the striker through. I don't remember who it was, but they played the striker through. The referee flagged for offside, and then a second after the whistle blows, you see the guy running in to defend the ball. So they were in line with the third defender instead of the second to last defender. And it was a clearly the incorrect call. But in terms of like game changing decisions, I don't see a ton of them in this first week. Um, so again, I don't think that there's a massive drop in quality, but there is, as you mentioned, a massive increase in the scrutinization and the fear of the loss of control, which does kill the flow of the game, right? So I mentioned it to you over text today that there was a Red Bull play that the Frankie Amaya got into the back of one of their guys, and really I think he was like half a foot away, barely made contact with him. Just put his hand on his back. Dude falls over. Referee blows for it. The ball rolled a foot and a half away. Dude stopped it, retook it quickly, and he brought it back and he pointed like right next to the thing. He's like, no, it has to be there. And that, that's going to come with that, trying to get people. I think the biggest issue that comes out of this quality wise is I read an article coming out of the Athletic that said of the 60 something referees that they brought in to replace for this week, 24 of them only received their basic referee license. So there are 3 levels of referee licenses in the United States. It's like, I think they just call it the referee license. So is your first one, but it's basically the grassroots license. Anybody who's 13 years old or older can get that license. So you get basic, and then you get regional, which is kind of like high school and a little bit more competitive. And then you get your national, which is, what these guys have, or they should have. And I think only about 10 or 11 of them, if I remember the article correctly, had the national license. So they were replaced with these, and you could tell that they were definitely not at the highest level. They had different mannerisms that probably came from the college game or other different, lower level pro games that you wouldn't see here in MLS, right? Like the guy at the Red Bull game today was extremely, extremely like poignant, I guess maybe might be the word, where he's coming over and every time that there's a call, he's trying to explain himself, even if nobody's asking. Like he's looking around telling people what he did. You don't need to do that. Just make the call and go, right? But no, I don't think the quality has dropped significantly. So that means, the other thing that I think really kind of comes into this realm here is, now what does this do for the perspective of the league, right? What are people looking into this league and doing? So I'll ask you, like, in terms of outside, not fans, but kind of just general people on the outside looking in. Actually, you can do either one first, and I'll build off of you. So you can either go with what are the, what you think the fans are thinking as yourself, or what people outside of the league are kind of looking in from the outside thinking.
I got to imagine a lot of like the casual fans, even within the country, or just like other casual fans from outside of the country. I got to imagine they probably don't know the refs super well. Like you and I, we talk about the league every single week. We follow it very closely, and even then, like we only know maybe a handful of the names of the refs that are in charge. So, I kind of struggle to see like how much a casual fan will notice the change in the referees, especially if they don't know who they are in the first place. Unless there were just like unless like in the coming weeks there are just drastically bad calls. And we were talking about how like we don't think the quality in week 1 thus far has been a significant drop off. But I do want to say that I don't think that's a knock against the referees that are striking right now. I think, if you want, as much as we complain about the refs, and believe me, Andrew is the first to complain about a one Mark Geiger, but if you want the best for the league, it's the guys that are on strike. They are the best referees that, not in the world. I'm not saying they're the best in the world, but in terms of what we have right now versus what we had last season, if you want the best, it's the ones that are on strike. So that's ultimately I think what the conclusion is going to come down to, and I don't necessarily think the replacement refs are going to come in and absolutely just stink it up every single game, and there's going to be missed calls left and right, and the entire quality of the league is going to get destroyed, and people are going to start thinking the league's an absolute joke. Like we've said it about many other things. People who hate the league are going to continue to hate the league and can use this as fire to be like, oh, like the quality of the league sucks so much and it just got even worse somehow. The people that support the league, I think, will support it, will support the situation however I guess they see fit. I mean, obviously you and I talked about it before, but I think we hope that they can get to a deal that is good for the referees that are holding out right now. Um, But yeah, I guess overall, I would think the casual fan probably doesn't see a huge change, but I think the more in depth, the more detailed fans, the MLS sickos, if you will, I think as the weeks go on, I feel like they'll be able to sense the change more.
Yeah, and I think really the fans on the inside are kind of in the same thing where, and I don't want this to be taken out of context, but you don't go to a game to watch the referee, right? So the only time that you recognize the referee is there is if he's done a poor job, um, or she, depends on who you have. But um, I don't think that the fans are recognizing a massive change. Now, I'm sure there is a good handful, and there are that are upset with the way it's being handled, and we're going to go into the last little segment here about what this means, not necessarily from a game perspective, but more of a public image, right? There are people who are upset with the way it's handled, but the majority of the people who are like, oh, I'm just gonna, I just texted my buddy here and he hasn't gotten back to me, but I would argue, or maybe not argue is the wrong word, but I would probably guess that if you were a casual fan who was like, oh, I got tickets to a home opener, I'm gonna go, and you showed up not reading anything about what went on this off season, you wouldn't know, and it wouldn't affect you, right? And I would agree with you on that. But from the outside perspective, and now we'll go kind of more into public image, right? There was a quote here by former MLS, I guess, employee, now a member of CBS Sports Golazo, Nigel Real Coker, and he basically put it very bluntly, saying, the word that he would use is embarrassing. It's not a great look from outside of America, right? In other countries where this sport is much higher up on the, you know, ladder, if you will, in terms of the sports world, the referees are protected, and they are made to be really respected figures, right? People want to be a part of there. That way it feeds down into the system, and people are always going to want to try and work the way out, whatever, right? But when the commissioner of your league is coming out and basically throwing all of these referees under the bus, it makes him a really easy public figure to point the finger and scream about how bad this is, right? And to a degree, that's Mark Geiger's, gosh, that's Don Garber's job, is to be the person people yell at, right? Because he works for the owners, and the owners makes it whatever. But very rarely, and you can correct me if you know something differently here, but I don't remember the last time there was a CBA for players, referees, whoever it may be, where this much information about it has gotten out into the public, right? Like the fact that we know all the things that they were complaining about, bargaining for, and then everybody's going out and airing their dirty laundry like that. I don't remember that happening anywhere ever at all. And regardless of if it has or hasn't, if the highest figure in your organization is coming out and basically saying, hey, we made a deal and you turned it down, so now you're confusing us and it's your fault, it's not our fault, it paints this picture of Garber, MLS, Pro, whoever else you want to be the person to blame, as a bully, right? You're trying to push the little guy around to get what you want, and um, it's just a bad look, right? Again, that's one of the reasons why we're not diving into the specifics, because there might be a legal side of it that we don't know, or somebody's lied about some figure they put out. We don't know that. But from a point of view, from a fan who is watching this from the outside, it's just a bad look. And at the state of where MLS is right now, you can't afford to have a look like that. But do you see it? Do you think it's similar?
I mean, I'll always be on the side of the referees union in this case, considering every single team in the league has an owner that's worth billions, if not hundreds of millions. It's like, I know you could strike a deal to get these guys back and pay them properly. And, like you said, have them garner the respect that other referees around the world are getting. And quite frankly, I think it makes MLS look hard to work with, hard to deal with, whether that's companies looking to get advertising deals with them, whether it's the MLS Players Association who's going to have to, continuously come to agreements with them. I mean, I feel like I remember there being some potential issues even with the last Players Association meeting between them. And I can't remember the details of that exactly, but I mean, if it's just like continuously running into problems, and it's making it look like they're trying to take shortcuts in this case, and they should just, like, the league has grown exponentially over the last few years, like club valuations, like all these owners are super super wealthy, even if we have the salary cap and it doesn't necessarily look like it because they're not splashing $1 billion like Chelsea is. They have that level of money. Like, they have so much money. Maybe not to the billion level, but you know what I mean. They have a lot of money. They could afford to properly pay the referees to have them play for them. And I agree. I mean, I think it's a bad look on the league, regardless of the he said kind of back and forth that's going on. Like, I think you got to just pay your referees properly, and maybe make it not look like you're so difficult to work with. Because I feel like it'll look. I don't know if it's something to the point where it would like cause fans or players necessarily to be like, oh, I can't come and play in MLS because the league is like really strict with their deals and give every like all these organizations a hard time. But I just think from a lot of like fans' perspective and people's perspective, it's gonna sour the taste on it's gonna sour their view of MLS. I mean, I guess we'll see in the long run if that actually has an impact on the league or whether it has an impact on Garber's position, but I'll kind of, I guess, just leave it at that.
I think that is a perfect way to describe that, Connor, because I'm not out here saying, you know, for the appeal of public image, just roll over and give anybody anything they want, right? Like, I understand that there is two sides to things, but if this community comes to you and says, "Hey, thank you for your offer. We told you the numbers were too low. We told you before you even made the offer." The biggest issue that really seems to be going on here is MLS and the litigator, or I don't actually know the proper word for it, but the person who makes the deal. MLS and the person, or pro and the person who makes the deal, shook hands and said, "Hey, this is a great deal." While PRSA sent somebody in saying, "Hey, this isn't a good deal. We're going to turn this down if you send it to us because it's not good. We don't like it. These were the outlines that we set, and I don't know exactly what they were. You are missing the ball on pretty much all of them. We're going to turn it down." So I think the middleman messed this up, from what I'm reading. But again, I'm not going to speculate too much on it. But at the end of the day, if they come in and they say, "Hey, thanks for the offer, but your number's too low," and you say, "Hey, this is our final offer," and then they deny it, okay, like, that's okay. But that should be the end of it in terms of the publicity. It should go out to the media saying, "Hey, it got presented. The referees turned it down. There's going to be a strike happening." End of. But to let it go back out into the media and then make it, go out. So basically, to let the referees go out and say this one thing, and then you go out and push them back. It's a big guy, little guy PR stunt that never goes over well with the crew, the audience you're trying to attract. Um, there were things that I was reading that an AR barely makes over minimum wage if you work out all the hours and stuff like that. They don't travel into, in no, I don't want to say chartered, but like for first class, or a nicer thing than just, I don't fly a lot, so I don't know what the classes are. But
Economy, like just
economy,
economy,
yeah.
like yeah, like that's I think the generic, like
Yeah,
what
yeah.
most
So
people fly.
business class, or is business the middle one?
Yeah, I think that's like the step up from economy usually.
Okay.
And then like
Um,
first class is the best, obviously, I think.
yeah,
Well,
yeah. So
other than like a private plane, but
sure,
I
right.
doubt the AR is
But
getting a private plane to go to each
well,
of the
well,
games.
the referees in general, right, are you know that's basically what they were making. They were barely making over minimum wage. They were traveling to okay, okay hotels, flying economy, and again traveling across the country. Right, this isn't England, Italy, Spain, where you can just hop in a car, drive 30 minutes, and you've just passed 7 soccer stadiums that you could have refed at, right? Like, this is the United States, where your trips are thousands of miles sometimes. And what basically the deal they tried to strike last minute was, hey, we'll keep talking about this, but sign this deal that says no strike, no lockout, which essentially means, hey, keep working for what you guys were working for before, and we'll strike a deal out and fix it at some other point. Which, of course, when you are making barely minimum wage, traveling the country and economy, and staying in 2-star hotels, is going to get turned down. So
Yeah.
they want them to work for the wages they worked for the last 5 years. And the thing that they're fighting against today, the only thing that they were really fighting against, they're like, oh, just forget about it and we'll figure it out later. Of course they're going to turn that down. Follow that last thing up with the biggest note that I got here, and it's from Matt Forrester, a former MLS referee. He went onto Twitter. He's now a litigation guy for insurance and businesses. I'm just reading his Twitter profile here. MLS, you go through a cycle of, I guess, a CBA every X number of years. You sign it for X number of years, right? This is the second time in the last 3 collective bargaining cycles for the referees that there's been a lockout. So this happened 10 years ago. I didn't have time to look into it and dive into the first one and how that all works. So I'm not going to, comment too much on it, but I really liked how you mentioned that MLS looks difficult to work with. If you're looking to be a referee and all you're asking for is something that isn't a minimum wage pay to be a professional league referee, and you're going into a league that's locking you out every other time you try and ask for that, that is a massive red flag to anybody saying, hey, I want to work with you, right? It makes it look bad for people wanting to work with the league. It makes it work bad for people wanting to invest in the league, like you mentioned. And when you keep talking about you wanting to be a top league by 2026 or 2027 is when we're all going to, you need to take steps forward. And this is a massive step backwards in that goal, right? So, massive misses for MLS here. I agree with you. I'm 100% on the referee's side. I think that they absolutely have the right to fight for what they're looking for, and again, whatever extra that may be, whatever they disagreed with. But it's poor on MLS to sign a $2.5 billion deal over 10 years with, Apple TV, plus all of the money they're getting from expansion fees and all the money to do all this, and you can't pay your assistant referees more than $20. Like, that's really, really bad. And again, there are a lot of things that we will defend this league for to no end. But this is bad. This is a bad thing for them. And I'm not happy with it.
100%. Yeah, I agree. I didn't realize they were making basically minimum wage. I mean, that's outrageous. Like, no way, shape, or form should that be the deal on the table. And for them to just be like, oh, like, we'll just talk about it later. Like, just keep doing what you're doing. Like, what? Why would they accept that? Like, there's no reason for them to accept. You didn't give them any incentive. Like, that's a benefit for MLS, and there was nothing given in exchange. So, like, why? In what world would they accept that and be like, yeah, okay, we won't lock out and strike? And is the benefit that you like keep your job? Is that the benefit? Like, that's not a benefit. That's what the minimum should be, that they should keep their job. You should be paying them if you want them to not strike or hold out. Like, it seems
Right.
pretty simple to me, I feel like.
I'll read from the thread here, and like I said, I'm just going to give all the information that I'm reading. I don't know the truth behind it, but I assume, being that he was a referee, I trust this to be true. So 2013 was the first year in MLS that they had actual employment contracts. Every other year before that were just I guess contractor, right? Go in, we'll sign you for a game. You'll get paid this much money, kind of like they do, at AYSO leagues, right? The way I used to ref. Show up, sign up for 2 games. Here's $14, go home, right? The first referee salary in 2013 was $35,000 a year. And then they said under the recently expired CBA, the referee's base salary started at $50,000. So the assistant referees made between $16,000 and $21,000, and then you got a match fee. So every game that you played went, and you got an extra $1,300 or so for every game, right? The annual earnings for a full-time minimum wage worker is $15,080 at the current minimum wage of $17.25 an hour. So you're paying, or you were paying, your assistant referees between 16,000 and 21,000. So literally like 5 cents above. I don't know if my math is right there. I might have just messed that up, but pennies above the minimum wage for a professional referee. Right. And then you mentioned the travel and the time commitment and all these other things. You know, he mentions that you flew, and then most of the time they didn't land you in the airport next to the hotel. So you got in a car and you drove another 2 hours in a rental car. Right. Like all of these things, and all they're asking is, hey, pay us a little bit more so this is worth it. And they're just like, nah, I'm good. Like that's just such a bad look, and it's unfair. It's I don't have the words to describe how bad that is. That's kind of the way I'm going to put that.
Yeah, especially considering the fact that I mean, I don't know what the source is, but this article says MLS had $587 million in sponsorship revenue last year, and yet your assistant referees are making pennies above minimum wage. That's insane. That's ridiculous.
Well,
But I
and
mean
let's be
that's a
fair. Let's be
whole
fair. Fifty
sorry,
thousand
go ahead.
dollars for a center referee is garbage too.
It is, yeah, 100%.
Like we're talking the ARs, and the ARs are getting shafted. Like don't get me wrong, like they're getting shafted. But the center referee only making 50K a year with the incentives on top is bad. Now again, there were reports out there 25% raises. You know, I saw an athletic article that said the first thing that they turned down was you know, they were getting 100 to you know, or 75 to 125% raises for, you know, different referees and stuff like that. I don't know what any of that, you know, turns out to be. You know, they're all reported stuff. I don't know if it's true. We haven't seen what it is, but at the end of the day, right, in a league where you are already grasping at straws to try and survive in your own country's sports landscape, something like this is just, it's not needed. It's a really bad look, and it's really forget the look. It's bad. Like cut look out of it. Like this is not a good thing to do. Period. Like you are a multi-billion-dollar company. Pay people what you owe them. Like it's not hard. I think they asked again, another thing that I was reading that I don't quite know what that, you know, what it turns out to be. But they were like, all we asked was a funding pot that cost less than $100,000 per team. So, you know, 3 million, if my numbers are right. Yeah. Like just about like 3 million extra dollars to pay referees a little bit more, like whatever the pool of referees are. Not the contractors, just the people that are signed on, right? $3 million. Quick math here. Is 6%. No, sorry. It's 0.6% of what Charlotte just not Charlotte. No, yeah, Charlotte. What Charlotte just paid you to get in the league, right? 500? That about right?
I can't remember what the expansion fee was.
I forget
Probably though.
which one it was. But there was a team that, oh, or was it San Diego? Was San Diego 500?
I'll look it up.
Yeah. Regardless, right? Regardless of who it was, you just got a $500 million check from somebody, and they're asking, "Hey, can we have 3 million of it to pay people what they owe so they can live?" No, that's wrong. That's bad. Like big red flag, right? Definitely not good. So again, all on the side of the referees here, hoping that they can come up and get the deal that they are owed. But uh, from a league standpoint, right? We're an MLS podcast, not a referee podcast. From a league standpoint, it is bad. It doesn't give you good. It doesn't give you good attention. It doesn't give you good, uh, you know, respect among other people. Like it doesn't show you that you are somebody that people want to work with, like you mentioned. So, um, goodness me, what a nightmare that is. But again, and again, second time in 3 years is not an accident, right? Unless these guys are coming in and saying, I want $400 million per assistant referee to referee your games, right? Which is not the case, clearly, if you're paying them $21,000 a year at the most, right? They need to do better. Plain and simple, need to do better.